Great. I hope you can all hear us well. Welcome to OPA. This is one of the pre-conference for iAstrologer, and we've decided to open this panel to everyone because it's such an important topic, and I think it's an important way for us to first of all show what we'd like to do, how OPA is working to elevate standards and invest in the future of astrology, invest in the future generation of astrologers. iAstrologer is an event that is basically designed to provide a support system because most astrologers are very individualistic. You know, as soon as we get out of our study program, we're pretty much on our own. Society doesn't support us, our families don't always understand us, and it's easy for us to become, functional on our little islands. So OPA is working basically not only to support astrologers as they want to become astrologer, but to make the profession sustainable so that astrologers are not only doing something they love and helping humanity, especially in a time of such intensity and where astrologers are very much needed, but they can also support themselves. So as Uranus is in Taurus, it is time to bring the sky to the earth and speak about a way to make this financially sustainable. And that's what the event is partially about, is to make us stronger, to make astrology stronger so that the next generation of astrologers can indeed become more qualified, better educated, and better supported overall. So today the topic is specifically about addressing criticism against astrology. And the reason why this is so important in our profession is because if we want to be professionals, if we want to just study and be proud of what we do, because astrology provides such an important service. And as I spoke to Courtney Roberts, who's very invested in evidence-based astrology, she says one of her great motivation to try to raise the bar with astrology and to share it publicly is that otherwise it's wasted. You know, we have this amazing knowledge and no one benefits from it aside from a small group of, adventurers and daredevils who are willing to go against the stream. But it shouldn't be. Astrology is very valuable and it can help humanity, really. Now we're approaching our Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, and I believe this is pointing to an era. Jupiter-Saturn cycle occur every 20 years, and this next one is going to be in 2020. So I believe this is going to be some kind of milestone for astrology, because Aquarius is often associated with astrology. So it brings new authority, but it also will bring more scrutiny. As astrology gains more prominence, it will also face more criticism. And we need to understand our critics. You know, they're not all stupid people. They sometimes have valid arguments. We need to be better educated and understand what these arguments may be about. So a little more about iAstrologer. It's taking place, as I mentioned, in Tucson. Two parts. Part one is mostly about the practical aspect, how to make your practice lucrative, writing workshops, video production workshops, how to create a YouTube channel. You know, some astrologers have 100,000 followers on YouTube and basically get all their clients from these channels. So these are tools in today's world that really make astrology more viable, more practical, and more fun. And most importantly, it allows us to also be very creative. So as you can see, there's also going to be a professional photo shoot because we're going to focus on branding. And if you want to speak at a conference, or if you want to have a website and your photo is blurry, or you wear dark glasses, it's just not going to work. So we have professional people who are going to help with this, seemingly not so important, but actually quite important aspect of our practice. The important thing also, during the event, we're going to offer scholarship, $2,500, $1,500 monetary grants to those who we see show a lot of promise as future astrologers. We want to invest in the future generation. So that's, we're basically walking our talk and want to give the money. So if you feel that you have something valuable to offer, just join, and we'll make sure to promote you. And even if you don't get the grant, what we do at iAstrology, we're going to also place people in major conferences. For example, if we see that you have something interesting to offer, we can place you at NORWAC, one of the most popular conferences in Seattle, or NCJR conference taking place next year in Baltimore, September. So this is an opportunity to have a career break, to basically be visible, enter the um, the conference circuit. This is, you would need to come to Tucson next year, excuse me, next month, October 4th to 7th, 2018. So this is the branding, this is the photo shoot, um, this is what our photographers sent us. As you can see on the side, self-publishing, how to prepare for public speaking, making videos, software training. Most of us have software but don't use the full potential. And then, of course, we also have a raffle, which we invite you to participate in. This raffle is for our scholarship, and the draw is going to be this full moon, August 26th, so I think it's Sunday. So go to the OPA website, you'll see a banner, and you can get a raffle ticket, support the scholarship, and get free readings, attendance to conferences, get free books, and many prizes that are both good for you and for this effort. So thank you for helping us, and enjoy this raffle. So I'll let Victoria speak here. She's going to present, along with myself, a peer group.
Mhm.
That's going to be in part 2 of iAstrology.
Uh, yeah, the peer group process is actually the keystone activity of OPA. And it's a long tradition that 3 participations in a peer group process would lead to your certification with OPA. It is a very, I think, signature activity where 4 participants and the facilitator get together, and we, as peers, do the 3 processes as denoted there for day 1, 2, and 3. And you share your style of reading with one another, playing the client and the astrologer. We share our experiences with difficult charts, and it's discussed supportively with one another. And we also reveal a business plan for our future and receive a great deal of encouragement from one another. It's a process that's honored among professional helping professions.
And that's something that most professions have, a peer
Mm-hmm.
review, where people who practice astrology watch each other work, basically, and learn from each other. So we have 5 groups open. 2 of them are sold out at this point. It's group of 4 people maximum. So you can look at it and see if it speaks to you. You do need to be a practicing astrologer,
Mm-hmm.
have paid reading for at least 6 months to participate.
Right.
And
It
then,
is. It is a vulnerable thing, but it's also, I think, very deep and an illuminating process. It changes your view of things when you get to hear other people
Well, it
talking.
changes quite often your whole way of practicing, you know.
It does. It's true.
So
Opens it
thank you,
up.
Victoria.
You're welcome.
And we'll move to Gemini, who can introduce himself. Gemini has been, a very important force in the community of astrology for bringing back, in a creative way, in an accessible way, the return to basically bring the sky to our computers. Most astrologers are very focused on their two-dimensional charts and forget to actually identify what's going on in the skies. So as part of OPA certification process, we have now included an astronomy program as part of the certification, and it's specifically for astrologers. So you don't have to be intimidated by the math or by complicated equation. It's something that is about the basics of astronomy. And this is very much the root of our discussion today, because as we speak about arguments against astrology, we need to know the basics of astronomy to respond to these arguments. So I'll let Gemini continue.
Yeah, unlike the peer process, you do not have to be a practicing astrologer to come reconnect astronomy and astrology. So, my catchphrase is re-nature your astrology. I think this is a really significant sign of the times that's happening right now. And I'm very honored that OPA has decided to make astronomy part of the certification. And I've been asked to come lead a group. It's my first time really doing a 3-day intensive with a large group, and I'm really excited about it. So you'll see some examples of some of the animations that we'll look at together in the classroom today. But what you won't see today is a lot of the very important embodiment exercises, which is how I transmit this information, so that it's not just like geeky science class, cold, or static images, which can be really hard for us to connect to, but we're actually out under the night sky connecting, and during the day building medicine wheels and other amazing ancient archaeoastronomical devices to really help us connect to this marriage of heaven and earth and embody it. And one of the great reasons, as Maurice mentioned, is so that we can respond intelligently rather than react defensively under attack from the rationalist scientific community against astrology, something we're here to address today in general. But it's also so that you can form a direct, embodied, sentient connection to the heavenly happenings and to the planets. And so we'll be practicing this not only from classroom academic approach, but also from a shamanic approach out on the land and under the sky.
Thank you so much. And there's also going to be a dance event at iAstrologer. So it looks very exciting, and we really look forward. If you feel called to take your astrology more seriously, if you think this is a profession for you, if you are struggling as an astrologer and feel that you need more clients, this is a place for you. So as we move forward now, let's explore our topic today, the common arguments against astrology. And there are many, but we have limited time, and so we're going to focus on some of them. The common one is the signs today are not aligned anymore with the constellations. Somebody born in July 27th, who is astrologically supposed to be a Leo, is actually not born when the sun is in the constellation of Leo. So there's a discrepancy between what the sign is astrologically and where the sun is in the sky, what backdrop, what constellation. So that's a very common argument, and it leaves a lot of astrologers baffled because it does make us look so stupid. Like, don't you know that there's been such a change and there's a precession of the equinoxes and the signs are not aligned anymore with the constellations? Well, the only thing we can say is that we do know. And that's one thing. I mean, we will speak at great length about all of these things. But one thing you must tell your critique or wherever you read this is not so much that astrologers are stupid and they're uninformed and uneducated. They actually know that there is a gap. But I will say honestly, some astrologers don't know because most schools don't really bring this up. You know, we speak about what the meaning of Leo is and what the square between Venus and Pluto means, but we don't actually discuss the fact that astronomically, the sun is not in Leo and by the end of July and early August. So let's talk about that. Moreover, the signs in astrology are 30 degrees equal, both in the tropical zodiac, which is referred to as the Western, and the sidereal zodiac, which is referred to as the Vedic astrology. So, Leo is 30 degrees, Virgo is 30, and so forth. But if you look at constellations, they have each very different size. Cancer is a tiny constellation. Virgo is a huge constellation that takes up to 45 degrees, and so forth. So this also is a common argument that you'll read, that the sign of Scorpio is actually only lasting like 10 days and not 30 days as we claim, because the sun is passing over the constellation of Scorpio only for a short amount of time. So this also makes us look so stupid. How don't you know this? And I'll say, I live in Arizona. I'm very close to the Flagstaff Observatory, and I bring students there occasionally. And time and again, we go through our presentations there, and almost every time, the presenter will say, these stupid astrologers, they think that this and this happens. And that basically, if you're born in July, the sun is in this constellation of Leo. So they keep bringing these arguments in their everyday presentation of the sky in those astronomy centers. So the mainstream is constantly listening to that brainwashing. And we have to remember, they have a point. But they are not educated because they don't realize that astrologers do know that, and they take it into consideration. The third argument, there's a 13th sign on the ecliptic. The ecliptic is where the sun is passing. It's the signs of the zodiac. Between the sign of Scorpio and Sagittarius, called Ophiuchus, and it's the serpent bearer. So we're going to definitely talk about Ophiuchus because it's a common argument. And once again, a valid argument because it's actually there. The foot of Ophiuchus is somewhere on the ecliptic. But we do know it. And there's a reason why, we're not including it fully into our charts. So we're going to talk about this. And the most common argument, how can you fit a whole population into 12 fixed categories of sun sign horoscopes? And the whole thing about sun sign horoscope, is it valid or not? Should we pay attention to these columns? What I will say is that, everything revolves around the sun. The sun is important, and there is a value to sun sign astrology. But many of these columnists are actually not astrologers. They are ghostwriters. They are people who just write something to fill the column that has nothing to do with astrology, and they put it under the label of astrology. So there could be some good quality sun sign astrology, and most of it is mediocre because it's not addressed professionally. And then, of course, there are 2 or 3 different zodiacs: the tropical, the sidereal, and then the constellational. So we'll talk about these main themes, and I'm sure we'll talk about more arguments, but at least these ones are ones that are the most common ones. And Victoria was sharing more arguments. Copernicus' heliocentric theory exploded astrology when they discovered in the mid-1500s that the Earth was not the center of the universe, and that everything revolved around the sun and not the Earth. It put astrology in a mediocre position, as if we didn't get the real science. So that's the beginning of the split between astronomy and astrology. The new planets cannot be incorporated in traditional astrology. For astrology to work, there has to be an action at a distance, disproved by physics. So that's the mechanism of astrology. We are not sure exactly how it works, but there are many foundations we can rely on. So the sun and planets are not, are just things. How can they influence our lives? They're out there. Astrology fails to take the precession into account, which we talked about, the discrepancy between signs and constellations. The biology versus the astrology, and then the twins. People born with the same chart, whether they biological twins or astrology twins, don't necessarily have the same lives. So how come, if astrology works, they should be, leading parallel lives? And there's a whole article on that. How can astrology address mass tragedies? Did all the people who died in a plane crash or in the Holocaust all had, the same transit? And then the zodiac is an imaginary circle, and the principle derived have no basis in empirical facts. So, again, important point to keep in mind. Critics often do have a point. We must understand where they are coming from. But what we need to understand is that scientists commonly make the same mistake that they accuse astrologers of doing. And to begin with, they are biased. They come at astrology with their bias already charged with their prejudice and wanting to disprove it. So that's already unscientific to begin with. So if you want to really check astrology and research it and disprove it, you must do it scientifically. You can't just throw stones and tell us that we're not, that we're a pseudoscience, because that's what you're doing. As we know, people are misinformed because their only reference is the sun sign columns. That's the only thing they know. And religious people may see astrology as ungodly or even evil, because one of the main arguments is that if we can predict the future, it takes away the free will, and people are not responsible for their actions anymore. So astrology provides a context and influence, but it does not take free will away from us.
Attack of the rectangles.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me see. I mean, you'll all get the slides. Let me try to move this. I think, is this better?
Yeah.
And
this is informing the squares, man.
Okay.
Oh, that looks
So
better.
I will let our friends here talk. I just lost my mouse. So I have here some biblical references, which we'll get to. I don't want to spend too much time here. But just for the recording, Matthew, the three magi, the first chapter of Genesis speaks about the planets as signs, and Ezekiel, and there are many more, but these are just three that I brought up.
Maurice, I just put in the chat box for people who are here live a wonderful article or page that the great Kelly Lee Phipps put up some years ago. So there's a link to that there with all sorts of amazing kind of astrological revelations within the biblical scripture. Check it out.
Let's go back to our argument, and I'll let one of you, Brett, do you want to address the first argument, the alignment between the sign and constellations?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to show some kind of pop culture things where this has recently resurfaced. I mean, it's been around for a long time, and it's a decent argument, right? So as Maurice is saying, it's not only that tropical astrologers understand that the signs are not aligned to the constellations they're traditionally associated with. The sidereal zodiac doesn't align exactly either, because as Maurice mentioned, constellations of the zodiac are different sizes. So what I like to teach is, well, what in the heavens is the tropical zodiac if it's not constellational? And I'm actually going to take a little time here. Victoria, Maurice, you might want to just mute and chill out, because I'm going to take us on like a 12-minute journey through a few of the animations that I've created for the course. Because let's look at what is the tropical zodiac so that we can have an informed response to this challenge by the astronomical and academic community. What is the sidereal zodiac? What is the tropical zodiac? So let me share my screen here. All right, and first of all, this is the zodiac, but here we go. All right. Maurice, can you see the screen, or Victoria?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. So here's this Cosmo ad. Don't freak out, but your star sign has probably changed. An article on September 15th, 2016. NASA have decided to ruin our lives, or actually update the astrological signs for the first time in 2,000 years, meaning that a whopping 86% of us now have a different sign. You can see the URL down in the bottom here, and we might not have time to record that right now if you want to read the article in full. But this presentation will be on YouTube, and so you can pause the screen and record that and go check out the article if you want. They say because Earth's axis no longer points in the same direction, our astrological signs are about a month out. So what does this mean for you? Well, here's the new star sign dates, okay? And here they are. So this is a constellational zodiac, and we'll get back to what that means. All right. This is today, August 23rd, 2018. We say, sun is in tropical Virgo, is just recently ingressed, and there we see that the sun is very clearly aligned to the constellation of the Lion. We don't see this in the sky, obviously, because of the sun, but the software, and this is Stellarium software, which you can download for free, allows us to take the atmosphere away and see this thing. Brilliant, right? So the sun is very closely aligned to the great royal star Regulus today, yesterday, the heart of the Lion. So how can that be when we say this is Virgo, right? Sorry, I'm just starting a stopwatch so I know when to shut my mouth. All right, zooming in, very clear. Here is the sun aligned to the Lion. Now you'll hear me call constellations Lion, Crab, Twins to differentiate them from signs. I learned very early in my shamanic astrology mystery school with Daniel Gemario that they are different things. And this, in a sense, comes from the theosophical tradition. All right, so this link at this article to NASA goes to this place, which is Space Place. It's NASA's place for kids. All right, so let's zoom in a little. First things first, astrology is not astronomy. Astrology is not science. Astronomy is the scientific study of everything in outer space. That's a strong claim, by the way. But astrology is something else. It's not science. No one has shown that astrology can be used to predict the future or describe what people are like based only on their birth date. Still, like reading fantasy stories, many people enjoy reading their astrological forecast or horoscope in the newspaper every day, okay? So here's what NASA is teaching kids about our craft. On the right of this page, hi, I'm a Leo. No, I'm the Leo. And some people believe or make believe that the current sign of the zodiac affects how things go in their everyday lives, depending on the sign of their birth. This idea is called astrology, and people who claim to use the signs of the zodiac to make predictions are called astrologers. Mimi's birthday is August 4th. When she says I'm a Leo, she means that on her birthday, the imaginary line from Earth through the sun and out into space on the other side of the sun points to the constellation Leo. The trouble is, it doesn't. And read this article and find out why. And I encourage you to go check out the article, but let's just address a couple of things here because, you know, NASA's idea of what astrology is, they're stating it pretty clearly to the kids, is pretty uninformed, right? And one thing they're saying is, look, when Mimi says, I'm a Leo, she means that on her birthday, the sun is in the constellation Leo. Is that what she means? Is that what I mean? Absolutely not. Is that what you mean? Are you a tropical astrologer? I mean, there's even several days throughout the year, if you're a sidereal astrologer, that you can say this means the sun's in this constellation, and it's not true. So let's get into a bit of astronomy of the zodiac. Yeah, I'm just going to let you check out this article later, although I will say here, right, for this 13th sign argument, the Babylonians lived over 3,000 years ago. They divided the zodiac into 12 equal parts, like cutting a pizza into 12 slices. They picked 12 constellations, one for each of the slices. So as Earth orbits Sun, the sun would appear to pass through each of the 12. But they ignored Ophiuchus, is the claim by NASA, because they had a 12-month year and they could only have 12, right? And are they taking that from any Babylonian resource? And the answer is no. It's an assumption. All right. So I'll let you go check out that article if you'd like. December 1st, and this is a time in the middle of these new dates, or at the beginning of rather, that NASA through Cosmos says that you are an Ophiuchus, right? Now, NASA replied to this and said, we're not talking about astrology. That's not our gig anyway. And I don't want to get into all that here because of time. I'd rather get into what is this thing called the tropical zodiac. So I'm going to show a couple just clips from animations that I'm creating for my video course and that we'll work with at iAstrologer in Tucson this October. The cardinal directions result from the primary motion of Earth. What is our primary astronomical and therefore our primary astrological experience? Day and night, right? One is dark, the other is light. One is cold and wet, the other hot and dry, and we only have to live for 24 hours time to experience this profound cycle of yin and yang. I refer to Earth's north-south spin axis as Gaia's spine, and to the plane of our planet's west to east daily rotation as the circle of matter. The more accepted term is the celestial equator. Can you see why? And can you see how Earth's rotation establishes the cardinal directions? Because Earth spins west to east, we notice the heavens spinning east to west, which means the northern sky spins counterclockwise, and it does so about the north celestial pole, which in our time is very strongly aligned to Polaris, North Star. I believe this is an ancient depiction of the northern sky's primary motion to northern hemispherian eyes. The east to west motion of the southern sky is clockwise, but there is no star currently aligned to the south celestial pole. This changes with precession. We'll get back to that, but first, second things second. Earth's annual revolution, or yearly orbit about Sun, is the secondary motion. The plane of the Earth-Sun dance is called the ecliptic, which I refer to as the circle of spirit, because it's where the sun lives. If we extend the ecliptic from Earth's heart towards infinity in all directions, we encounter the zodiacal constellations. So from Earth's point of view, Sun is always held by one of these 12 star groups. The Archer, the Goat, the Water Bearer pouring onto Famolo below. The Fish, notice how big this constellation is. Not the case for Little Ram. The Bull with Pleiades on its back and bright eye Aldebaran. The Heavenly Twins, and the rather dim Crab. Regulus-hearted Lion. The Priestess, another giant constellation of our sky. The Scales. The Scorpion down below with Antares at heart. Back to Archer. The wheel in the sky keeps on turning. Unmute my audio, right. So here is June solstice, all right, summer solstice in the northern hemisphere, and this golden curve you see here is that ecliptic plane. It's the Earth-Sun relationship. So with our feet on the ground, it's a curve in our skies. And in the northern hemisphere, the summer signs, as they are in the southern hemisphere as well, they're just different signs, are high, right? So here's an image of the December solstice, and we see the other constellations of the zodiac. And you can see that the December solstice sun is here with the Archer and the Scorpion, and there's Ophiuchus, the serpent tender. All right.
Just one note, Gemini.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the recording captures the sound of your video.
If you hear it, the recording will.
I'm saying I'm not sure because we had technical issues before.
Okay, well, I mean, I could narrate it. It's just, I think we're going to try it. All right, so I did want to show this. Here is, you see the Capricorn glyph here, okay? This is tropical 0 Capricorn. We're going to look at why that is. And it's at galactic center in our days, very close to the exact galactic center mathematically measured, but very on the visible galactic cross where the Milky Way galaxy crosses the ecliptic plane. This is a very important sign of our times that we'll be focusing on a bunch in October at iAstrologer. So there's 3 zodiacs at least, and one is the constellations themselves. This is the zodiac that NASA's asking us to obey, I guess. The sidereal zodiac, the tropical zodiac. So what are these? Another short video here. Sun rises and sets because Earth spins. But what is the reason for the seasons? The plane of Earth's primary motion, or daily rotation, is tilted in respect to the plane of Earth's secondary motion, or annual orbit, by an angle of about 23.5 degrees. The spin axis, the spine of Gaia, is always north-south, so at March equinox time, Sun is due east of Earth center. This is why we begin the natural zodiac and the astrological year with tropical Aries, because east is the place of the rise, new beginnings. Aries, Taurus, Gemini bring us to June solstice, when the northern axis of Earth is leaning towards the sun. Sun is due north of Earth center. This is summer solstice for northern hemisphere, winter solstice for the southern. Cancer, Leo, Virgo bring us to September equinox, when Sun is due west of Earth center. Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius bring us to December solstice, when the southern axis of Earth is leaning towards the Sun. Sun is due south of Earth center, and this is summer solstice for the southern hemisphere, winter solstice for the northern hemisphere. Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces bring us back to March equinox, when Sun is due east, the beginning of the next astrological year. All right, so what I'm showing here is that the tropical zodiac is directional. One of our responses to what the signs and constellations don't align is that the tropical zodiac is seasonal, right? And the seasons are actually based on the same phenomena that I will suggest the tropical signs are based upon, which is the cardinal directions. In other words, it's a shamanic system. So you're hearing this strange thing of like, at June solstice, the sun is due north of Earth's center. What do I mean by that? Where we are on the surface of Earth, the cardinal directions in a sense are relative. I mean, they're completely defined by Earth's primary motion, the daily motion, the spin, right? But east is what's rising right now. And that's different for me where I'm sitting currently in Seattle than it is for those of you who are in New York or Hawaii or wherever you are, right? But at the center of Earth, which is actually where we measure astrology from because it's the one place where we are all connected, right? North is going to be where the northern axis is leaning. And currently that points to Polaris, right? So at June solstice, the northern axis is leaning towards the sun, which creates summer solstice for the northern hemisphere and winter solstice for the southern hemisphere. And what I'm suggesting here is that the tropical zodiac is entirely based on the cardinal directions. In fact, this is why the cardinal signs are named the cardinal signs. If it was purely seasonal, we're going to have another issue to defend, which is why would we use the same energetic archetypes for both hemispheres where we have seasonal opposition? And it's an interesting question I think we should be looking at as astrologers of, why does the sun rule Leo in Australia where this is the middle of winter time? And there's very interesting responses that I found. It's not for today, but very importantly this. The signs of the tropical zodiac, which are not the constellations, are completely based upon the cardinal directions, which are themselves established by the spin or the primary motion of Earth. And this will never change. It will change where it is against the constellational backdrop, but when the sun is due south of Earth's center, this will always be December solstice, which in the tropical zodiac we call sun ingress 0 degrees Capricorn. All right. This is an image of the astronomy of the tropical zodiac, and we're going to watch a couple more short video clips. Imagine watching this annual dance from sun. Your view of Earth changes between March equinox, June solstice, September equinox, and December solstice, right? Let's have a look at this seasonal shift from the side. Now, all right, let me mute this. Sun's journey through. So here's the trip. From the sun's point of view, and here's the sun on the right, very far away, obviously not to scale. But from the sun's point of view, when Earth and sun are in the alignment that we call equinox, whether it be March equinox, the sun's ingress tropical Aries, or September equinox, the sun's ingress tropical Libra. This means that as the Earth is spinning, the sun is basically looking directly at the Earth's equator. If you live at the equator on equinox, either equinox, and listen to that, equator and equinox, the sun is going to be directly overhead at midday. It's a day, we say, without shadows, right? And wherever the declination of the sun, right, which is the measurement of the angular position of the sun from the celestial equator, Earth's equator projected out to space, wherever the declination of the sun is, say it's 15 degrees north latitude, in declination, it's going to shine at midday over 15 degrees north latitude on Earth. So I'm going to play this, and we're just going to watch that a little bit. And I think the key to this phenomena that we'll get into a little bit as things begin to move is just watching the truth that in this directional zodiac, this angular relationship between Earth and sun is consistently shifting during the course of the year. So this is one of the ways that we can see the tropical zodiac. And this is a lot of information to present in a little bit of time. So I'll tell you at the end of this thing where you can go watch some of these animations at a more gradual pace. But I really wanted to show this because, especially here, at December solstice, right? And what is this? This is when the axis of Earth is at its maximum lean, right? In this case, December solstice, the southern axis of Earth leaning towards the sun. So summer in the southern hemisphere. northern axis leaning away from the sun. So winter in the northern hemisphere, you can see the shadow line, which is always perpendicular to the sun, right? So you can see that there's more shadow. In fact, the entire Arctic Circle and above is completely in shadow at this point, while the Antarctic Circle and south of there is completely in the light at this time, right? So that's what I'm trying to show with these animations. But this we call what? Zero Capricorn, right? Sun's ingress zero Capricorn around December 21st every year. And this is when the sun shines directly above, as you can see the declination here, 23.5 degrees south latitude on Earth. Well, what do we call that? We call that the Tropic of Capricorn, yeah? So NASA's argument would be that the sun is not in the constellation Capricornus at this point. In fact, at this point, it's more aligned to the constellation of what they call Sagittarius, and you'll hear me call the Archer. So why is not NASA and the other astronomers renaming our earthly tropics? Why is this not the Tropic of Sagittarius? Why do we not call the Tropic of Cancer the Tropic of Gemini? Because that's the date, or the constellation that they're saying is aligned to that date. I thought I had a date slide in here. All right, so very importantly, I'll just take a few more minutes. Why? Why are there these many zodiacs? This is a slide actually to show, let me read here at the bottom of this NASA article, and something that Maurice mentioned earlier. The constellations are different sizes and shapes, so the sun spends different lengths of time lined up with each one. All right, and this is very true. As Maurice mentioned earlier, Virgo, the constellation, which I'll call Priestess, is about 47 degrees in arc, right? So the sun's going to take more than 30 days to journey through that star group. So anytime we take a 12-sign zodiac, whether we're doing it like this, right? The tropical zodiac, what we're doing is we're looking at the places where at equinox, the sun is at the intersection of the celestial equator, that's the axis of the primary motion or the spin, day, and the ecliptic, that's the axis of the secondary motion or the orbit, year, right? It's a very astronomical device, our tropical zodiac. So whether we're looking at these 4 stations of equinoxes and solstices to be the cross from which we define the 12-sign zodiac, or we're beginning with a star. And this is what sidereal zodiacs do. Sidereal means of the stars. And so basically we're picking a star, and there's many different opinions of how to do this. The most popular is to work with the star Spica at 0 degrees.
We have to move on to the other argument. So,
okay, Maurice, I got 2 more minutes to wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so 24 degrees tropical Libra is where Spica lives, or 0 degrees Libra on many sidereal zodiacs. But if you just look at this image, you'll see that we have to kind of cut some of the constellations because they are different sizes, right? Now, why does it change at all? Why does the sidereal and tropical not always remain the same? And the answer is there's a third motion of Earth. So the spinning of Earth, day, the orbit of Earth about sun, year, and there's this motion that's usually taught as this wobble of Earth's axis because of gravitational effects by sun and moon on the Earth's equatorial bulge that causes a very slow motion, precessional motion, opposite to the spin or the orbital motion. So we go backwards through the zodiac over the course of about 26,000 years. And this brings us different north stars or south stars because the axis is changing its orientation. Well, if north and south are changing, so are east and west. And east and west are defined by where these 2 planes intersect, which in the tropical zodiac we call 0 Aries and 0 Libra, the equinox points. So the equinox points in all points of the zodiac are slowly precessing or moving backwards through the constellations of the zodiac. And one of the standard wraps for when the age of Aquarius begins is when the constellation of Aquarius is rising due east or aligned to the Aries equinox point. So there's much more to say about that, and the magic of where we are aligned in this time Maurice, did you want me to talk about these boundaries or with Ophiuchus quickly?
Yes, let's talk about Ophiuchus, but just before that, I want to summarize some of the things because I believe some of the terms may not be so familiar with everybody, may not be familiar with all the terms. So what is important to retain from this conversation, and you can look back at the graphics earlier on, is to understand, first of all, just to know, because some of you may not, may hear this for the first time, that there is a difference between the signs and the constellations. So as Gemini was describing, many of the signs are defined by the directions of the Earth and the Sun and its rotation in its yearly cycle. And we have these 4 cardinal points that relates to the sign of Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. And then the signs are divided in 12 equal parts, even though the constellations are not divided in 12 equal parts. If you look at the sky, there's a complete different size. And NASA and the astronomers are basically constantly trying to diminish astrology as if we are not aware of the fact that the constellations are different size from the signs. So that's also what leads us to this 13th sign controversy. And just one last thing. One thing I want to emphasize is that the constellations, what we call Leo, what we call Cancer and whatnot, are a group of stars that are only in such a group because we look at it from the Earth. These stars are actually at a completely different distance from one another. And if you were to look at them from Venus, you would not see the same pattern. So it's a very much an Earth-based perspective. The Leo can only be seen as Leo from the Earth. So basically, NASA determined the division of the constellations in 1930. They mapped the sky as we know it today. They added new constellations, they changed some of the constellations, and so it's a different, slightly different image that was before 1930. And I believe that's where also the controversy of Ophiuchus, plays into, is it an additional sign or not? Is the sun going through Ophiuchus after it passes Scorpio before it gets into Sag or not? So Gemini is going to show another very important illustration to show you where the dilemma is and where the hypocrisy also is.
Cool. Yeah, let me just add a couple things to that. So I like to say that constellations are terrestrial and not celestial. I mean, Venus is really going to see the same constellations as we do, same neighborhood. But if you were looking at like the Orion Nebula from Sirius, there's no giant there. There's no Orion's belt. Those stars are a long way away from one another. So it's a very important thing. And so it's, I think, also important just for me to say personally, I'm not suggesting in any way that constellations don't matter or have some astrological input. And it's especially stars, right? So one of the ways that I think we can celebrate the marriage of heaven and earth, if we're tropical astrologers and we don't want to work with both tropical and sidereal zodiacs, or if you're sidereal astrologers, right, is for sidereal astrologers to also get to know the energy of the directions, and for tropical astrologers to work with constellations. Like my sun is Scorpio and it's aligned to the constellation of the priestess. And for me, that very much matters. That will be different in 1,000 years. So another thing is this, for me, it's not just proving to the astronomers that we know the arguments they're making against astrology. It's to teach them the astronomy they are forgetting. Like astronomers who have attacked me, and I've been attacked as an astrologer by astronomers, I teach them about these things like declination and the sun shining over the Tropic of Capricorn, and it will usually shock them, and then we start having a good conversation about it. So what I'm really interested in is teaching people the very real astronomy of the tropical zodiac so we can have an intelligent response to this claim. So let's look at, it wasn't NASA, but the IAU, who is the International Astronomical Union that created the 88 accepted constellations of our day. Fun thing is there's 88 keys on a standard piano, and Mercury orbits the sun in 88 Earth days. All right, so I wanted to just show this at my website, morethan-astrology.com. You can type that in /free, and I'll send you some stuff, including stuff where you can witness what we were just seeing with a slower pace, and you can take your time to integrate some of that sharing. All right, so getting into this image here, here is an image of these constellations. This is December solstice, okay? So the sun aligned in our time to the galaxy, which is really important. And these are these boundaries that the IAU defined in early 1930s, all right? So you can see this boundary drawn around the priestess, as I call her, and this one around the scales, and this one around the scorpion, okay? And so they've got Ophiuchus going way down here. Because one thing you'll notice, let me actually grab, maybe you can see my mouse, hopefully.
Can you make it closer, because it looks very distant?
Yeah, we'll do that, okay. So, and I also just want to grab something real quick, which will help us see. Okay, great. So here's the scorpion, right? This gold curve is the ecliptic plane. So it's moving through the scales and through the scorpion and through the archer and through the goat over here. And you can see that the scorpion dips way south of the ecliptic, which means low for the northern hemisphere and high for the southern hemisphere. Well, here's Ophiuchus, who's this amazing constellation, giant constellation. And he's traditionally been shown standing on the center of the galaxy here, where the arrow of the archer and the tail of the scorpion points, one of the great mysteries of the sky. But notice that the IAU drew Ophiuchus way down here, which is way closer to bright stars of the scorpion, like Antares, right? And this is Graphius and Deshuba. So they give those to the scorpion, which for some reason goes all the way up here. And then they give all this area, including where this artist drew the scorpion's claw, to Ophiuchus, even though Ophiuchus has no stars there, right? The debate is over these two small stars, which are very faint. And the idea is that the scorpion's tail is further from the ecliptic than that. And the golden or orange curves you see here, what those are is 15-degree divisions of the ecliptic plane and of the sphere of the heavens measured from the equinox points. That's the tropical zodiac. So here you're looking at the tropical zodiac on the grid versus IAU's suggestion of a constellational zodiac. This is what NASA is arguing for. And the idea is, why would the IAU determine the zodiacal constellations? Now, why there's 12 signs, that's a whole nother thing. Maybe that will come in at the end of this wrap, but you've heard enough from me for now, so I will take a break.
Thank you so much.
All right.
We appreciate this illustration because it helps us not just understand, but see it. And so what you've noticed, and that the zodiac and the signs that are associated with the constellation of the zodiac is basically where the sun is passing through the 12 months. And we do see that the sun passes through the leg of Ophiuchus between Scorpio and Sagittarius. However, these boundaries were redefined in 1930. And beyond that, as Gemini was pointing, the stars of Ophiuchus that are on the ecliptic are quite faint, and they're the division of the constellation is kind of taking over the constellation of Scorpio. Why? Because it's arbitrarily pretty much defined by the scientific community, the astronomy community. But interestingly, when on the other side of the zodiac, the constellation of Orion also has stars very close to the ecliptic. The astronomy community does not include Orion as a constellation of the zodiac. So they make a big argument about Ophiuchus, and then they don't make the same argument about Orion, which is indeed very inconsistent. So what can you say, if people come to you and they tell you where there is a 13th sign? First of all, you make them realize that astrology is astronomy with correspondence. So astronomy brings myth with measurement. It's science with spirituality. What does that mean for us? Is that there are measurements. As Gemini was pointing out, there is an astronomy to the tropical zodiac. But these little discrepancies, whether to include Ophiuchus or not, are discrepancies that the ancient probably worked with and understood the sky slightly different from what we do in 1930. I mean, keep in mind, for example, that the sign of Scorpio is actually represented by the scorpion, the snake, and the eagle. So it is not something I can prove, but it may very well be that the ancient did include the constellation of Ophiuchus as part of the scorpion. And that serpent bearer, that man handling a snake, is very much part of the myth of Scorpio. As we speak about Kundalini rising, as we speak about shadow work, and all the themes that are associated with Scorpio are including the snake. So it's not completely far-fetched for us to understand that there is a fusion between Scorpio and Ophiuchus. So we see the astronomy and we see their argument, but we also see where we're coming from. And when you sit at a dinner table, it's important to bring that up, to at least have a discussion about this, and to understand that, first of all, we are aware of it, and second of all, it's a deliberate choice not to include Ophiuchus. But I will also say some astrologers do bring this part of the sky that relates to Ophiuchus as an additional layer to the sign of Scorpio. When you have planets at the end of Scorpio and beginning of Sagittarius, basically referring to that part of the sky, maybe there is another influence that us astrologers need to learn about. So there are many debates about this, and you will see arguments within the astrology community about this. So the important thing is to have an intelligent conversation, is to understand that even if we don't agree, we do know what we're talking about. And I would
Maurice?
like to pass the mic to Victoria in this respect, because Victoria, has studied history and astrology quite extensively, and I would like her to share about the ways to empower ourselves as we discuss astrology, come from a place of authority and confidence.
Thank you. Thank you. What I'd like to comment on what you were just talking about, Maurice, and you were talking about the spirituality that is inclusive within astrology. But astronomy is really an offshoot of astrology, and the ancient astrologers were astronomers as well. They did not have the telescope as a tool, as a device, but they watched the sky, and it was probably a lot clearer in ancient times than it is now with our atmosphere in the condition that it's in. But notice that all of these beautiful graphics that Gemini has show the constellations as these animal figures. So I think it is also a little hypocritical for them to try to push away our mythological interpretation of the constellations and derive from that the zodiacal signs when they accept the illustrations of these constellations. So there already has entered into our perception from Earth of the cosmos as mythological. They've already accepted the narrative. And what astronomy has tried to do, or has seemed to try to do, is to remove the narrative from sky observation, along with where we're trying to live our life on Earth. As you pointed out well, both Maurice and Gemini, this is from the perspective of Earth. And we as human entities in our life on Earth, every day we're looking at the sky and we're living our life. And we adapt by night and day. And we adapt by phases of the moon. And in adaptation, we notice that things work when we follow the moon, say, in our planting practices. This is ancient practice, and it's followed to this day. You can buy an almanac from the 7-Eleven today if you want one, and it has that in there. And also, the narrative speaks to something that is more than just the mind. Even in ancient Egypt, the ancient Egyptians knew that you must listen and operate and seek truth, not only with the mind, but with the heart and the intuition. And ironically, it was during that time in World War II of the Holocaust, which we mentioned before, that Viktor Frankl pulled out of the despair of that period and the experiences he had losing his whole family, that he wrote a psychology based on his experiences that identified that even more than survival, the need for survival, is a need to find meaning in life. And I believe in seeking the meaning in life based on our experience and what we observe, and honoring the tradition of the correspondences between heaven and earth. Astrology has become perennial. A totally mental, analytical approach cannot tear it down. In our being is a need for meaning, and a recognition, more or less from individual to individual, that there is a growth and a development process that is in sync with nature itself, the growing cycle, the developing cycle. And as we go from childhood to teenage, you know as well that changes can occur suddenly, and they are timed. In the 70s, I read the book Passages by Gail Sheehy, and I was astonished. It could have been an astrology book. The psychological changes that are gone through with each decade that we live are so in agreement with the description of important transits, particularly of Saturn. And it's these cycles that have been on and on, that we observe, that we live. And when you go to an astrologer, they speak to those. And when they start speaking to the cycles, you start remembering when certain things happened in your life that were life-changing, that were traumatic. And the astrologer, as you tell your story, the astrologer can see exactly in your chart when that was happening, and lending from the mythology that we use and the interpretations as it has developed through the age of psychology from mythology, they can lend that word of wisdom and meaning to the experiences that you had. And furthermore, the experiences that you're having in the present. and reestablish for people the confidence that their life, whether you study astrology or not, whether you even know what your chart looks like, your life is happening in correspondence with that chart. That's astonishing. And where does that mystery lie? It doesn't lie in the experiments and the expectations of experiments that science has set up. Science is a technique, and a very good technique for validating fact from what is not fact and for testing things. It's very necessary for our modern world and its developments. But when you have seen these cycles at work and it verifies within you, and I can say to a client, you are right on time. And moving forward, these cycles have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There is a cycle at play here. Certain cycles in your chart are at play at different times in your life. And whatever you choose to do, I can lend a narrative of probability, not certainty, but probability of when there would be a good window of time to really pursue what it is that you want to do. And so we're working with client-centered consultation, determining
And
what the free will is for the client.
that's a very important point that you brought up. The first one among many is that the one thing that we can tell anyone that's curious, whether they're cynical or whether they're really enthusiastic about astrology, is that whether or not you believe in astrology,
Mm-hmm.
it works on you.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you can verify this is bring any cynic to observe these cycles and time their life, and they will see that even if as they were oblivious to astrology,
Mm-hmm.
these cycles were operating in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
That's what blew us away, I think, many of us, when we started to get into astrology and we looked back and said, wow, I moved on that day and my parents divorced and I
Mm-hmm.
had this massive Pluto transit. We were not aware that astrology was functioning. And that's why it's very important in our conversation
Mm-hmm.
to establish that astrology is not a belief.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually a science, a fact, because whether or not we believe it, whether or not we understand it, it is in our lives. It
And at the
works.
same time, we cannot, from the chart, see the details of how these crises periods or these energies will manifest. There is, like a chart, you cannot tell if a person is male or female. You cannot tell if a person is from a particular country or not, except by the place, but it doesn't speak to the kind of culture that you are in. That is the part that the client has, and that's why it is so important in a consultation that you receive the client's narrative to help them match their narrative with what information you have to give about what the cycles represent.
I'm going to share this slide, which is exactly what you were referring to, and I think we can,
Mm-hmm.
people can have a visual of that.
Mm-hmm.
So what astrology, if we want to represent astrology and if we want to understand astrology properly, we also need to understand what its limitations.
Right.
And be honest about it. So astrology has to work in a context, because what is astrology? It's a time and a place and a picture of the sky. Whatever happens in that time and place, whether it's an event, whether a dog was born, or whether a human was born, or whether
Or a
that
corporation was established.
yeah, we don't know. It's
Yeah.
just a moment. We don't know the gender from the chart. We don't know the
Right.
culture. We don't know the
Uh-huh.
species. And that is something that us astrologers need to be aware, that astrology works with context. Because you're not going to read, even if it's the same chart, you're not going to read it the same way if it's a corporation, or if it's a human being, or if it's a dog. So that's important. The other thing that you mentioned that is critical is that we astrologers quite often are trapped in this need to prove astrology right, and we try to do that by making absolute predictions. And this is going to happen, and it's going to happen at that time, and we become very absolute. And guess what? Sometimes, maybe 50% of the time, we nail it. And we nail it because we can track the cycles, and we see Saturn doing that and squaring that, and we say,
And we already know the context that they're living in.
Exactly. So we basically can make those predictions, but then we realize that the next prediction is completely off. So what happened there? Why do we get it sometimes and not others? Because what you said was the key point. We look at probabilities. We look at an estimate. We don't make absolute predictions, because that's where our ego can easily lead to the manipulation of astrology.
And that's where astrology gets its big black eyes. It will predict a disaster. One of the most damaging things that happened in the year 1524 was that they made a theory that when the Earth was created 6,000 years prior, all the planets were in Aries. And in 1524, all the known planets out to Saturn were in Pisces, would be in Pisces in February, and they predicted a world-ending flood. And the hysteria and the fear and the panic was unbelievable in Europe. And when it turned out to be a rainy year, people would panic as soon as it would start raining, and somebody who built their ark on the Rhine, a 3-story luxury ark, was stampeded and he was stoned to death. It caused disastrous behavior and turned out not to be true at all. Yet, in the context of Europe, there was a very strong feudal culture. Later that same year, talk about a Neptune effect, and they didn't even know that Neptune was there, or a Piscean dissolving. The feudal system broke down so completely in those middle countries in Europe that basically the feudal system came to an end. It was the beginning of the end. And it was after that that people from those regions started coming to North America, coming to South America, exiting out of the countries.
What we're saying basically is that we could see the influence, we could understand the influence, but we couldn't give it an absolute form. And as astrologer, we need to be humbled, and we need to understand our limitations to provide a better service.
Yeah, and in a sense, that's as astrology, we should be humbled. And this is true in our personal lives as well, right? Because as Victoria mentioned, we have to honor the context and the narrative of the client. But often the time, I've had experiences where very cynical astrology deniers are basically asking me to prove astrology to them. And they'll give me their birth data. And I can see that October 2015 was for real, right? And I can just ask them, what was October 2015? What was going on? And maybe how did that relate to this happening 18 and a half years before? And if somebody's coming to me for a session, they're very open to investigating that. But if people are coming very cynical, they're like, oh, nothing happened, then you're wrong, right? Without even taking a look. So I think it's really important when we approach the public not to wound astrology and say the global flood's coming and be wrong about that, Maurice
Yeah.
shared a wonderful video on the OPA discussions page where there was a local Seattle astrologer who was guessing people's sun signs by looking at them and asking some basic questions.
I remember
And
that.
he ended
Yeah.
up being 3 for 12. And he
I
goes,
think it
oh,
was,
that's not bad. And I would say that's really bad for astrology.
actually, I think it was 6 for 12, but
No, he was
still,
3
it's not
for
good.
12.
It was
And
not good.
but you might have watched a different one. But
I
either
don't know.
way, I think it's really important when somebody comes to us that we honor who they are.
Hmm.
And I'll just suggest some things from my own life where I'm so excited about astrology as you are. We're
Hmm.
so passionate about astrology. We've seen the incredible gifts of astrology as a healing, feeling, knowing, growing, incredible force in art and science.
And the principles are so solid. Like when someone comes, like you're saying, who is looking for testing you, you can take the planet that represents timing, Saturn, and you can look at where it is in their chart. And just from that alone, you can do what you were talking about, like October of 2015, what was happening in this area of your life. That's
Yeah.
sometimes a good way to deal with that and maybe
For
help them to
sure.
open up.
But very importantly, what I'm saying is some people are so closed that they're not even going to hear that, right? So
Exactly. Just like we don't have answers to some of their questions. We don't
I
know
have
how it
found it
works.
to be incredibly powerful to
Mm.
start very simply with people. First of all, decide, do you really want to engage with somebody? If they're coming to you, even if they're coming cynically, somewhere in them, they probably want to come to astrology. And
Mm-hmm.
we know throughout history, so many debunkers have become astrologers, right? But
Right.
start gently. And my favorite thing, you know, a lot of us just say, okay, do the tides have an effect on Earth? Are more babies born during full moon? Let's look at the facts. But I like to start with day and night. Like just asking somebody, hey, what's the difference in your energy in the middle of the night versus the middle of the day?
Mm-hmm.
And ask them instead of tell them. And they might have some resistance, but no one can deny that night and day are completely different. That's a really wonderful place to start. And if it's somebody in your relationship with, just stop there. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like next time we'll talk about something else, right?
Right.
I think it's really wonderful to lead people to the mysteries, to allow the mysteries to lead them in instead of trying to force our love onto people who are really opposed, because it's going to take them some time.
That's true. And you have to start with things that you know they've observed and that they can agree with, and they feel that they also have knowledge in this.
Well, the point is, like you said, um, is someone coming to astrology, completely blocked and completely. I will share, a story about a cynic that came to a reading. And one of the things that many critique will say about astrology is that we use blanket statements, things that everybody can relate to. Oh, you're going to go through a change, or you need to let go, or it's time for a transformation, or, you had difficulty with your parents. And these are things that indeed the 12 signs can relate to. So as astrologers, we need to be good astrologers and not go with blanket statements and be
Mm-hmm.
more specific. And one of my stories was this lady, came to me and she was, crossed armed and uh, charged against everything I was saying. And she said, yeah, but this could apply to everyone. Like every second, she would bring that up. And then,
Mm-hmm.
what I did is I looked at her children's chart.
Hmm.
And her children were not in the room, so I could not see, I could not have an actual physical reference. The only thing was their chart. And I described her children so accurately and so specifically that she was out of excuses, that I was just picking up things from her, and that she was basically, I was reading her body language, or that I was using blanket statements. And that's something we as astrologers do need to pay attention to, is our own, indeed, blanket statements. Now I want to end because we're running out of time, and thank you all for taking the time, and for our readers to continue with us. But a few things for astrology. Our day, month, and years are derived from the movement of the sun and the moon. So our rhythm is solar and lunar. That's just the beginning. So if our rhythm is solar and lunar, why not planetary? Is it really far-fetched to understand that if the cycle of the sun is so directly influencing our day and night and month and year, why not Mars? Why not Saturn? And as such, when we come to an argument, one of the way I found that is very practical to present astrology is that astrology is a study of cycles, of planetary cycles, and see how the planet cycles correspond to cycles on the Earth and human cycles. So that starts to make more sense rather than, Pluto beaming energy on us. You start to understand there's timing, there's cycles, there's something about the whole mechanism of it that corresponds to what we're doing. And what you were bringing up, Victoria, that we estimate and we can bring probabilities about the future, that is very important when we speak about astrology in social conversations, to kind of diminish those expectations. And this is not different from the weather forecast or from a doctor that reads your symptom and says, well, the probability is that the surgery will be successful. The probability is that you have, this and that condition. No scientist is absolutely sure 100% of anything. A lot of them are playing guess games and estimating just like we do. And like you say, astrology brings a narrative to the astronomical measurement. So we are part of a larger order. And astrology includes astronomy and correspondence. So we are actually a step above astronomy in many ways because we derive from it and we go farther to bring spiritual meanings and a higher order.
And we apply our intuition and our ability to see things as analogies.
And I would like to refer people to an article that's posted on the OPA website. You will go to publications on the OPA website. It's an article that says the 12 fallacies every astrologer should know. It's a very important article by Robert Curry. I am just looking here at some of the questions. And another article I would really like everybody to read is Same Chart, Different Soul, The Astrology of Twins, that answers that argument about why do people with the same chart, have different lives, if they do. So that's another article that's on the website.
Good.
So this is what we do at iAstrologer. We work on all the different layers of what it means to be a successful astrologer. We speak about the financial aspect, we speak about the educational aspect, and we speak about the social and the science of it. So it's a very comprehensive event with really amazing faculty. Everyone here is a specialist in their field. You will recognize some familiar faces, some of them less familiar, but nonetheless talented. You have editors here, you have astronomers, you have presidents of organizations, you have conference organizers. And so you will be really in good company. So this takes place in Tucson next October, October 4 to 7 for part 1, and October 7 to 10 for part 2, where both Gemini and Victoria will be leading their groups. And those of you who are not part of OPA, well, where have you been this past 10 years? Join us and be part of this movement. Make a difference. And I will just look at last questions before we close to see, if there's anything we missed.
Maurice, can I say a couple of things while you're reading?
Just one. Thank you, Gemini. Carl Jung does a huge justice in his scholarship research. Will you send this to attendees? Yes, we will send everything to the attendees. So mostly people, would it make sense to link in astrology to a spiritual, religious, psychological science? In that sense, it's not like astronomy, though it includes some astronomical value. Exactly what we talked about. So thank you. And yes, last words from Gemini.
Amari used this term in the chat that I love, with soft skeptics. And I think an approach is how to soften the hard skeptics. And any good salesperson knows the way you make the sale is to have the person convince themselves they're making it, right? So it's really about a gentle approach and not needing to prove ourselves, right? And I will say, however, that I am after a physical proof of the tropical zodiac. We've been working at this sociologically, like the wonderful work of Gauquelin and others. And I believe that there are ways that we can model the Earth-Sun dance and actually show through scientific experiment that we're going to have 12 signs. So somebody give me $1 million in a lab and we'll make that happen. And so thanks for hearing me out. I hope you'll come to iAstrologer. I shared that link before, which is morethan.astrology.com/free, where you can take the first 12 lessons of my Sacred Astronomy video course. And it's going to be maybe a prerequisite for people who are coming to Tucson anyway, so we can really launch in. So I'll be reaching out to everybody who signed up, and I hope you'll come and play in the desert and connect to the planets personally. Thank you.
And most importantly, whatever aspect of this you relate to, take your astrology seriously, because today, I think more than ever, the world does need more astrologers. And not just astrologers, but qualified astrologers. So we don't only want to encourage people to become astrologers, but to really take the time to do it well, to do it appropriately and professionally. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for honoring astrology.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Blessings to all.